Hello. This one is fun. This video actually was asked by my son. He asked me to talk about beliefs. So he was confronted or challenged by a little child, a friend of his, who didn't believe something that Danny said, and that he deeply believed in the statement that he made. And so he was perturbed. Um, Knowing him, he probably tried to convince him why he was right and the other guy was wrong. And so he came to me and he was saddened because somehow the fact that another person believed in something very different than what he believed in really rocked his boat. I didn't expect that. Sometimes he's solid and sometimes he's not. So we discussed beliefs. And it was interesting for me because as I'm dealing with him and talking about belief systems, then I realized that we are still, as human beings, still fighting each other on beliefs and belief system opinions. And so it wasn't a revelation, but it was a confirmation how early it all begins. Beliefs. And my way to talk to my son about it was to reinforce something in him that was real from an experience, and explaining that that experience was real for him, and therefore it began to construct a belief system based on that experience. And when it repeats itself, when more and more experiences confirm the initial experience, then that belief systems grow, and that perhaps the other person had a similar experience, um, but different, meaning similar in that that child also experienced something that made that something very real for him. And it doesn't have to be the same as Danny, even though it's similar subjects. They lived it, experienced it differently. And so in that way, I was able to help him understand that um, the truth, the little truth with a little t of that child, didn't have to rock Danny's truth with a little t. And I say little t because somebody made a comment a long time ago, truth is always the truth, there's only one truth. And so we understand that. We know that, love is love, and a lie is a lie, and a fear is a fear. Although some people will go deep into that one, saying fear is not real, but when you feel it, it is indeed very real. So let's not go too deep in that particular area, and let's keep it at the little truth, the ones that we experience as human beings, personalities, egos on planet Earth. And we live events and situations and establish certain belief system. I know that being in the health and fitness industry, I see that a lot in the way people eat. Um, they're vegan, they do paleo, 40, 30, 30 eating, 40% protein, 30% carbs, 30% fat, um, keto diet, fasting. Some people do fasting until a certain time in the morning. Never eating melons with any other fruits. That's another one. And I believe that from what I've experienced with many people, because I've handled many people's diets and their self-image and body weight, and however they experience health, and coming to me to help them feel and live a healthier life, whatever that is for each of them, because in my experience, that has shown itself to be very different with each individual. So all these belief system at some point helps them a great deal. It helps their digestion. It helps them let go of processed food. If they focus on paleo, they focus a lot on fresh food that are not canned or processed or bagged. And so certain system may work for a certain amount of time, and then you get attached because it worked, and it worked really well. And then you're attached to that belief system, that particular way of viewing eating, diet, that has served you for a while. Same with a religion, same with exercise, um, and also love. If we experience love in a certain way um, in the early years, it will be very challenging to rock that system, even if that system is not enhancing to the individual. Even if it's hurting their choices, they are choosing people that will repeat the hurt that they've already experienced somehow, but they know it, it's familiar, and they had to learn to be okay with it somehow. So extracting them out of that belief system sometimes is very challenging. And again, I have lived trauma in my life, so I understand um, the how trauma is. There's a book I'm just being reminded of and looking at. It's fantastic, and it deals with the trauma in the body and how it stores there, and we have to acknowledge that your thought may process a certain way of a certain system and may understand that that system is not working anymore, but that way of behaving is stored. The fear and the way of surviving that particular trauma is stored in the system, in your body, in your tissue, in your muscles, in your viscera, and you have to acknowledge that it isn't there. And this is where somatic work, Feldenkrais, drumming, yoga, Tai Chi, um, all these way of acknowledging the body, the rhythm of the body, is very useful for healing and dismantle a system, a belief that is not working for an individual anymore. Um, so it reminded me of a lot of what I've dealt with in my line of work, my official line of work, and where people get attached very much to um, how they're being approached in the eating, the meditation, whatever meditational system has worked for them. And when you ask them to be flexible and you ask them to really see if indeed it is still the best way to go about things, if indeed that way of eating or that way of exercising or that particular meditation or yoga system, whatever they've been doing, you know, diligently, if it's still what serves them best. And I so often saw, and I remember living that way back then as well. I know what that feels like. It's so safe, that place. You got used to it, and it helped you so much. And it still served a certain purpose to keep things in control. And when I ask them to be flexible and to look at this, is it still helping you? Is it still the best? Because there's so much more to life to explore. Are you willing to explore, to shake it up a little bit, to see what else is out there after 5 or 10 years of dealing with themselves a certain way, and they're still encountering certain problems, and they come to me with these chronic problems. And I'm so surprised how often individual will acknowledge and be able to assess the situation with me and realize that is not the best, or there is a possibility for something else, and so often will decide not to proceed. So they were able to actually see that it is not what is best for them, perhaps, from this moment on, and yet so fearful to explore anything else. And they prefer to stay there in what is safe, what is known, as opposed to explore the unknown. And so what I was trying to explain to my son in a more simplistic way was the principle of pure flexibility, cultivating the ability to be flexible, to be open, to not be afraid to let go almost on a daily basis, that one does not have to label him or herself vegan, vegetarian, um, on and on it goes. We don't have to label ourselves anything like that. For now, it seems to do me well to not eat red meat. Or for now, yoga in the morning at 6 seems to serve me well. But to remain open to different idea and different concept and exploring something new. So if hard, very demanding workouts have served you well, but there's a chronic sort of level of fatigue that you keep running into at certain time of the day, a fuzziness of thinking, and this is just an example. Perhaps exploring more medium level workout as opposed to all out. What would it be like for 2 weeks or 3 weeks to do medium level workouts? How do you feel? Your energy system, do you feel more replenished? Is your mood better? But if the hardcore workouts have served you to be in a certain physical fitness level that you appreciate, you'll be very scared to let go of that. And that's a simplistic example that I'm getting into. But the concept of not being attached to idea, not being attached to belief system, to explore feeling safety in the unknown. This is where I'm leading this conversation. Feeling safe in not knowing who you will be tomorrow. And that doesn't mean that you don't go to work, you don't shop, you don't get up, get breakfast ready for your kid. But sort of look at your reality in the morning as if you hadn't been there really yet, as if this was one of the first time that you cook breakfast for your family. What would it be like to pretend that this is the first time? How would you cook the eggs, the toast? How would you make your shake? How would you welcome your husband in the morning, or vice versa? The openness and the willingness to not label and be stuck in a system and an idea and a label of what you are, who you are, how you behave every day, that certain action in the morning that gets you moody because you're always the one doing all the dishes and sort of stuck. Again, I'm trying to find very realistic daily situation. How do you live the actions that you go through every day? So with my son, I explored that at his level, the ability to be not threatened by the unknown of someone else's system, belief system, and not being threatened because you're movable. You're like gelatin. I told him like a jellyfish. He loves jellyfish. Soft, movable, and that you can be open to exploring different things and not getting attached to anything as if this is the only way I can be healthy. This is the only way I can feel loved. This is the only way I can feel safe. And that's the bullet point, is that all these things are there to create a sense of safety. And then you remove that particular stick with the label on it, and suddenly you're not safe at all. So were you really safe? If all it took is to remove that label or change the fact that you wouldn't be a vegan anymore, that you would have an egg, let's say. And again, I'm not going into ideology and philosophy. I'm just using example to get to a place. So it's just a pointer. So I'm not discrediting people that believe that animals should not be used for nourishment and should be honored. I'm not going there. I'm just saying, if all it took is a particular change to rock your level of safety, were you ever safe at all? Or were you holding on for dear life to that way of eating, that exercise program, that belief system. And if any of that is rocked, like my son was rocked that morning, were you solid at all in your own beingness, your own sense of self, completely open to being completely different tomorrow? If that was a guided move, if you were guided to suddenly reach for something different, and again, I'm not talking about reaching for Coca-Cola or a hot dog, although it could be, but not the destructive kind, the curious kind, the creative kind, the joyful kind, the curiosity of it all. What else could I expand myself into? And can I feel safe in complete movement? And that, I think, is real sense of self, real health, real knowing that you can be all that. You can explore it all, and therefore you can be very capable of listening to yourself. So you can hear all the other voices without having to judge it as right or wrong, push it away because you're fearful of it, surrounding yourself with anything but that particular thing that threatens you or makes you angry. You can hear these voices, see the different lifestyle, different way of emoting, different concepts. All of that can easily coexist around you because it's not rocking, you're not solid. You're movable, you can get curious about certain things, you can investigate, having a conversation without having to be right. Therefore, you can really listen, be curious about it, and curious about how you react to that. Curious about the impact of certain new information. So the belief system that we get stuck into, that sometimes can harm ourselves or limit ourselves to a better, greater, healthier, more joyful, more peaceful I, me. So that was the end conversation with my son. Can you explore having these conversations with your friends without having to tell him why he's wrong and why you're right, because it's so threatening to you to hear something completely different than what you believe in? Can you do that, honey? And so it was a wonderful conversation, and he told me I should do a post on it. So that's what I did. I hope that it was interesting and served you somehow, and I thank you for listening. Be well.